Number 10. Clinton Road. Clinton Road is located off Route 23 in West Milford, and if you happen to find yourself there, make sure you keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times. Not only is the area rife with many paranormal legends, sightings of strange creatures and ghosts, but there is an old ruin that draws evil. The Cross Castle nearby was built in 1905 before burning down 14 years later. Now it is just a shell of a place, but gatherings of witches, Satanists worship there. Should you come across them and have managed to avoid the vengeful spirits that wander the woods, don't make a sound. If you are spotted, these groups will hunt you down and kill you. The road is notorious for UFO sightings and mysterious disappearances, along with rumors that many bodies have been buried there by professional killers. If you do want to tempt fate, you can toss a coin into the Clinton Reservoir, summoning the spirit of a little boy, but thankfully he is one of the only benevolent spirits on the road and will even return your coin. So, get $1, earn $1.
Coming into number 9, we have the Norwegian Mountain Menace. This story was posted by Tonbury King on Reddit. They said that they and their buddy decided to go on a late night drive into the Norwegian mountains to watch the sunrise across the land, which sounds really nice. He said that the drive up the mountain was very enjoyable, and there's also a bar at the top. Although they knew it would be closed, they thought they could sit on the benches, have a little smoke, have a little chat, and just take in the view. On the way up, they saw a person sitting on a boulder. They only realised what they saw after they'd driven by, and as it was late and the roads can be a bit treacherous, they thought they'd reverse back and see if the person was okay. This is just classic Norwegian politeness, and good on them. Unfortunately, their act of kindness led to some serious spooks. They saw the person was a woman with a long white dress and long beautiful hair. She turned to look at them and they called out to her. I'm gonna read what the Redditor wrote here. Her face was 3 times the length of a normal person's face. Her eyes were completely blank and she had a smile on her face. Creepy. The Redditor also said that they were nearly paralyzed with fear, but they drove on anyway. The next day, both of the guys in the car contracted a high fever that lasted for days. Coincidence, or maybe not? Coming into number 8, we have the midnight scratching. So this story comes from a Reddit post around 4 years ago. It seems that a guy was driving back from a family reunion. He decided not to stay the night because he had to work the next day. After 45 minutes on the road, he said he felt a very big wave of tiredness come over him. He simply couldn't operate the car anymore, so he decided, you know what, I'm gonna have a nap. There was no lay-by or any place that he could park off the road, so he decided to drive into a field and park his car behind some trees. He then fell asleep at 11:20 but was woken up 30 minutes later by a scratching sound. He was really tired, he had a quick look at the clock and he decided just to ignore it, assuming it was probably an animal. He then went to sleep but was awoken by the same sound around 50 minutes later, and this time he was super freaked out. He thought actually maybe it wasn't animals, because why would they continually scratch for an hour? He looked into his rearview mirror and he saw someone or something running off into the forest. He decided to drive and head back to the road. He was done with this. As he drove forward, he saw an abandoned car with its doors open. Now he drove a little closer to investigate, and then a man came sprinting around the corner, yelling at him to get away from his car. The guy was pretty terrified and drove off. He said that the moral of the story was not to go sleeping at the side of deserted roads, and I've got to say, hear hear. Coming into number 7, we have the pickup trucks. This story was submitted to the subreddit Let's Not Meet. A girl and her friend Amy were driving from Redizo to Albuquerque. As the girls loved exploring, they took the NM55, a more remote road. They saw a white pickup truck ahead of them in the distance, and when they got closer, they saw that the truck turned across both lanes and then pulled over across the road. When they drove by, they noticed that the driver was a middle-aged guy who was staring at them very intently and talking into a walkie-talkie. When they passed him, he pulled back on the highway and started following them. They then noticed another pickup truck slowly coming towards them. Now this one was an older, more beat-up truck. When they passed it, they noticed that the guy was also talking into a walkie-talkie. The truck passed and then turned to follow them behind the white truck. The white truck then tried to bump them, but they kept on speeding faster. It then became apparent that the trucks were trying to get the car in between them. Now luckily for the girls, a US Park Service car came off a little side road, and then both of the trucks U-turned. The girls were freaked out though, and they had no idea what the intention of the truck guys were. Coming into number 6, real life could be scarier than any movie. Apparently so. Now this story comes from a road trip from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. The driver went through Amboy, a ghost town well below sea level and reportedly a location for satanic activity. The driver stopped by the Amboy sign to take pictures to show friends. As they drove forward through the deserted town and onwards through a canyon, they saw a red car stopped in the middle of the road. As they got closer, they saw a suitcase and two bodies lying face down. Feeling truly freaked out and uneasy, obviously the driver drove on, pulling out their 9mm pistol from under their seat because they really had a niggling feeling that it was a trap. I wouldn't stop. I mean, I would call the police later, but this is a lot. When they passed the scene, they then looked into the rearview mirror and they saw that the so-called bodies were getting up and around 20 people were emerging from long grass. The driver then hit the accelerator and motored forward. Now they recalled their experience saying, "I will never know what would have happened to me if I'd gotten out of the car. Somehow I don't think it would have been very good. Sometimes real life can be scarier than a movie." I agree. Honestly, sometimes my life is scarier than a scary movie. Coming into number 5, nothing good happens after 2 AM. I feel like this was an episode of How I Met Your Mother. Either way, sometimes I have to agree. A guy wrote a long and winding tale about a trip he took from Nashville to Kentucky and back again. He'd got into a fight with his girlfriend and he'd wanted to drive to blow off some steam. As he was headed to Alabama, he realized he was running low on gas, so he pulled off Interstate 65 and drove off the ramp near a gas station. This is when he noticed something very strange. The only other car on the road was stopped at a green light. It was after 3 AM and the guy driving figured it was weird, but might just have been because the other driver was tired. When the light turned red, the car rolled forward, pulled under the overpass and turned its lights off. The driver didn't want to go forward when the lights went green again, so they waited. When the lights went green a second time, they decided, you know what, they're just going to move on, and the guy then started following him. When he got to the gas station, there was also a police officer. Now he thought, well, maybe I'm going to be safe. That being said, the stalker also followed him into the gas station, parked and got into the lineup. After the road tripper paid, the stalker also left the line to follow him again. Now the driver said he sped through some red lights on his way home, and it's still the creepiest thing that's ever happened to him. So I visited the Golden Gate Bridge in December and it was really, really beautiful. That being said, I did have a scary time there, but that is a whole different story for a different day. At number 4, we have the story of the Bay Bridge. So San Francisco has a number of beautiful bridges, including the Bay Bridge and the famous Golden Gate Bridge. A man and his granddaughter were driving the epic route from San Diego to Portland, and they were stopping in San Francisco. They drove over the Bay Bridge and were struck by a diversion. The diversion led them into a district of a town with no streetlights and a very, very eerie vibe. The roads were deserted, but not just that, the streets seemed deserted too. A car drove by, but it was a Japanese model 1930s car. Eventually the detour took them over the Golden Gate Bridge, which was very dark with not even the toll booths open. The granddaughter, Kate, who was driving, started to go over the bridge, but she said she felt a force with her in the car trying to turn her around. Eventually, she managed to shake it off and drive forwards. And when she spoke to one of her friends who lived in San Francisco about the experience, they said that the Golden Gate is never dark, it's always lit up, and that area couldn't have been deserted as there was a festival on in town that day. Spooky. Okay, we've had loads of fun with Reddit here, but let's move on to some news-officiated real-life road trip stories that made national headlines. Coming into number 3, we have the murder of Peter Falconio. This story scares me so much as it is so simple and so easily replicated. On July 14th, 2001, Joanne Lees and her boyfriend Peter Falcono were driving on the Stewart Highway near Alice Springs in the Australian outback. Road tripping around, the couple in their 20s were enjoying a backpacking vacation in a VW camper van. As they were on the road, a driver in a Toyota 4-wheel drive flagged them down. He said he'd spotted that they had engine trouble and Peter got out to investigate while Joanne got into the driver's seat to rev the car. That is when she heard shots. She was terrified, and then the man reappeared at her window holding a gun to her head. Now he managed to tie her hands behind her back with cable ties and was dragged into the back of a man's car. When he was distracted, moving Peter's body, the girl then fled into the bush, fearing for her life and fearing she was going to be raped. She managed to successfully hide and the man looked for her, passing close by, but he never found her. He later drove off with her boyfriend's body. Later, Joanne flagged down a road train driver who rescued her. Now the body of Peter Falconio has never been found, but the killer was later identified by DNA on Joanne. John Murdoch was found guilty and sentenced to 28 years in prison. So not all road trips are taken in cars. A lot of cyclists take road trips hitting the pavement with 2 wheels. Sometimes it can be the ultimate way to experience the open road. Unfortunately, Unfortunately, what this cyclist discovered will haunt them forever. At number 2, we have the Annecy killings. The Al-Hilli family were on a holiday in France and taking a road trip through the Alps when they were shot in their red BMW. Parents Saad and Iqbal and Iqbal's mother were killed. The family's 2 daughters were wounded but luckily survived, although their 4-year-old was found hidden under her dead mother's legs 8 hours after police got to the scene. Next to the car, a French cyclist, Sylvain Mollier, was also shot dead. The scene was discovered by another cyclist, Brett Martin, who rode by the horrifying scene. While the murder investigation was opened, the perpetrator of the 2012 attack has not been found. Some investigators think that the murders were random, which is scarier because there could be a deranged killer waiting to strike again. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. I would never hitchhike, but probably only because of stories like this one. I get it though, it's a cheap way to take a road trip. In the 1970s, there were no real frame of reference as to how dangerous hitchhiking could be, but then the murders started happening. Between 1972 and 1973, 6 women were found dead and naked in rural areas near creeks next to roads. All of the bodies were of females. They were hitchhikers who were traveling around Sonoma County and Santa Rosa in California. The murders are still unsolved to this day.
Starting us off at number 10 is Route 666. What a fitting number. Also known as the Devil's Highway, Route 666 is a 200-mile north-south carriageway that goes through New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, etc. And funnily enough, the route was renamed to Route 491 back in 2003 because of the original satanic associations and the fact that so many accidents have taken place on it. Every time a fatal or non-fatal accident has happened on the road, it's always been blamed on the name of the road, not maybe someone with a DUI or anything, but the name of the road. Everyone just assumes something paranormal is definitely at play here. Many Native Americans believe skinwalkers are the reasons for all the accidents because they appear out of nowhere and so suddenly, so cars just have to swerve out of the way. Shamans even warn drivers not to continue, but then would have to be summoned to take the lives of those who did not heed his warnings. If skinwalkers aren't bad enough, even hellhounds have been noted to patrol regions of the road in packs. Witnesses have said the hounds have kept pace with the cars no matter how fast they were going. And of course they can also shred your tires with their claws or teeth or both and then proceed to maul you inside your car. Paranormal aside, even mechanical failures seem to be more common on this highway than others. Flat tires, overheating, breakdowns, everything apparently. There's even a haunted truck that collides with cars on purpose to run them off the road, which is just personally just not what I'm looking for on a road trip. That's just not really my vibe, personally.
Coming in at number 9, we have We Are Family. In December 2014, Redditor Polar Bear Puppy posted this horrifying image with the caption, "I was driving down a woodsy back road in the mountains when I saw something out of the corner of my eye." I don't like the look of this, I'd be screaming for help. This honestly looks like a family of smiley woodland killers with cylinder heads. The picture received 4.1 thousand upvotes on Reddit and over 8,000 views on Imgur. People wrote some pretty fair comments on both of the social media sites too. On Imgur, someone wrote, "You stopped to take a picture and now you're dead," which probably is what happened, except they uploaded it. On Reddit, one viewer wrote, "My gut is saying it's a distraction. You should have been looking the opposite direction." I don't know what, yeah, maybe it's a decoy. The driver didn't seem to know the story behind the picture, but it can't be good. Honestly, looking at it gives me chills. Coming into number 8, we have the wedding dress. YouTube user Bill shared a scary story from a 1 AM car journey he was taking in March 2016. It seems he came across a woman wearing a wedding dress, her face covered with a veil, and she was walking very slowly along the side of the highway, holding flowers in her hand. Incredulous, the driver shot a video of the woman for Snapchat. He then uploaded it to YouTube. Apparently the woman stayed silent and would not respond to offerings of help. Bill wasn't the only person who saw her either. It seems so did radio host Big Daddy Graham of Sports Radio 49 WIP. What a celeb. What the woman was doing at that time of night alone in a wedding dress, we don't know. Coming into number 7, we have Scotland's most haunted road. Yep, that's right, that is the A75 from Annan to Gretna Green. Shout out. One day I would love to drive from John O'Groats to Land's End. As we all know, it's one of the great British drives, that and clockwise to anti-clockwise around the M25. I would settle for the A75 though, it's a beaut, although it is a scary Scottish beaut. So many road trippers and truck drivers have reported seeing specters in the road whilst driving. Famously, in 1957, a truck driver reported that he swerved to avoid a couple walking in the middle of the road. However, when he went to investigate, he found that they had miraculously vanished. Coming into number 6, we have Route 66 and the KKK. Back in the 1940s, there was no scarier stretch of road for black Americans than Route 66. While the 2,440-mile stretch of road is often romanticized in the American psyche, its road of dreams sentiment is not shared with many Americans of color who are persecuted as they tried to travel the stretch. 44 of the 89 counties that lined Route 66 in its earlier years were all white communities that banned black people after sundown. What happened if a black American found themselves in this community after sundown? Lynching. That's what. And of course, there were the pockets of KKK organizations. The Ozarks on Route 66, for example, were a popular lynching spot, and the KKK ran rallies near the road approaching Springfield. Like, seriously, what an awful blight on the world's history. Coming in at number 5, moving from Route 66, we have Route 666. What is this? It's a road that you may not want to travel down alone. Route 666, aka the Devil's Highway, is the 6th spur of Route 66, although states that the road runs through, including Utah and Arizona, have renamed it Highway 191 as to avoid superstition. Nonetheless, the Devil's Highway remains, and it runs by several sacred Native American spots. Whether or not that's why the road is creepy remains to be seen, but there have been countless reports of spooky goings on since the road opened. One story comes from Linda Dunning, who said that while she was driving along the road with her husband on one evening, a flaming truck came careering towards them. They pulled over into the desert to let it pass. They were freaked out, but it just sped on off into the distance. The Dunnings aren't the only people to have reported the fiery vehicle either. Coming into number 4, we have a body in the car. In August 2017, a woman drove for 2 days with her dead daughter's body in the car before being involved in a car accident that blew her cover. 37-year-old Erica Newsom was driving with her dead 11-year-old daughter, Kaylee Plummer. Newsom drove into a guardrail in West Virginia and was seen dragging a body into the woods. When the woman was caught, she said that she was trying to drive her daughter from Jacksonville to Buffalo so her father could see her body. Creepy. The incident happened around 760 miles into her trip after Newsom had been driving with the body for 2 days. Western Virginian police said that it was clear that Plummer didn't die in the car crash and that her death was being treated as suspicious. Seriously, who drives for 2 days with a dead body next to them? Ugh. Coming into number 3, we have the Salt Creek abduction. In 2017, 2 girls appeared in a 60-minute interview on 9HD. 23-year-olds Lena and Beatrice were traveling in Australia and they wanted to go on a road trip from Adelaide to Melbourne. It's supposed to be one of the most amazing drives out there in Australia. The pair advertised for a driver on Gumtree, and when 61-year-old Roman Hines replied, they were very excited to get on their way. Little did they know that the man was a rapist and potential murderer. Soon after they started their journey, the man asked if they wanted to visit Salt Creek Beach to see kangaroos, and they said yes. Now this is where things took a dark and disgusting turn. Hines tied up and raped Beatrice, and when Lena tried to help her, he hit her over the head with a hammer. Eventually the girls managed to escape and found help in a local roadhouse. The police found Hines and he admitted to raping another backpacker in 2014. He's been sent to jail for 22 years. Now I guess it goes to show that you need to be super careful who you trust to drive you. I for one would never just trust a person that I'd not met off the internet to drive me somewhere. Coming in at number 2, we have the Highway of Tears in Canada. You need to know about the Highway of Tears because you may feel pretty differently when driving along the stretch if you knew its history. The Highway of Tears is a 720-kilometer stretch of road on Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert in BC, Canada. The route is surrounded by First Nations communities, and along the route a lot of people have disappeared or been found dead, most of which, although not all, are Indigenous women who have hitchhiked sections of the road. A number of killers have been known to strike along this road, including one of the world's youngest serial killers, Cody Legabokov. He killed 4 people in the area when he was just 20 years old. Serial killer Bobby Hack Fowler was also known to prowl the area. A lot of the cases of the missing or murdered females abducted whilst walking or hitchhiking in the area still haven't been solved. Okay, number 1 is disturbing, so warning for you guys. I don't know if you count getting a long-haul Greyhound bus as a road trip, but I do. Not everyone can drive, and getting around on a Greyhound or a megabus with a friend and spending hours on the road is sometimes a fun, if a little tiresome, way to travel on a budget. That being said, after hearing this story, I'm quite sure that I never want to go road tripping on a Greyhound ever again. Like, seriously, ever again. We have the murder of Tim McLean. Truly, one of the most horrifying road stories I've ever heard. In July 2008, 22-year-old Tim McLean was riding the Trans-Canada Highway from Edmonton to Winnipeg. As the bus stopped in Manitoba, Vince Weigang Lee boarded the bus. Then he later changed seats to sit right next to McLean. Don't you hate it when someone comes and sits right next to you on a bus when there's other spaces? Nonetheless, McLean decided to sleep, and as he slept, Lee slashed and stabbed him with a large knife. Now, the bus driver pulled over and evacuated the other passengers on the trip. Lee was locked onto the bus, and the driver couldn't get McLean's body. He was presumably dead by this point. Lee then decapitated his victim, proudly displaying his head to the passengers waiting outside the bus. He then began to cut off parts of McLean and eat them, again in front of passengers. So yeah, terrifying. Truly terrifying.
Starting off this countdown, we have the face print. So this girl and her family was road tripping from Portland, Oregon to the Northwest Territories in Canada to visit her grandparents. After driving for quite some time, they stopped at a campground to sleep in the van. She was fast asleep in the passenger seat when she heard strange footsteps coming from outside her van. She woke up and looked out the window but couldn't see anything, so went back to sleep. But the next day, she was horrified. When she woke up, she glanced out the window and saw a full face print on it. Someone had been peering in, watching them sleep during the night. Yep, that's a note for me.
Coming into number 9, we have the Woodsy Road Mountains. Sometimes when you are on a road trip, you come across scary things. Sometimes you stop to find out what the frog is going on, other times you just drive on. Personally, I would recommend driving on because you never know what could happen to you, especially when you're driving alone. This driver did drive on, but they did capture a photograph first. They posted the horrifying image on Imgur with the caption, "I was driving down a woodsy back road in the mountains when I saw something out of the corner of my eye." One commenter wrote, "So you stopped to take a picture, and now you're dead." Honestly, this is what I mean, never stop. The image has over 3,800 upvotes, and we're still none the wiser as to what was going on, but honestly, looking at that, it can't be good. Coming into number 8, we have the story of the green and white truck. This story was shared on Dazed Digital magazine by writer Emma Sutton. Emma wrote of a road trip that she, her mother and sister went on across Wyoming when she was 8. She remembered fondly that her mum loved piling her kids in the car and just hitting that open road. One time though, Emma remembers the drive being truly terrifying. The trio of girls were driving on some small and lesser known roads in Wyoming, and at one point they turned into a gas station. They happened to pull into the station after a truck, and as the 2 young girls and their mum were in the station, they used the restroom and filled up their car. The truck driver that pulled in before them must have seen them in the gas station and seemingly decided to start following them. The mum suspected as much and started feeling very nervous. Emma recalled her mum making a plan to pull over and then pretend to get out of the car at the next gas station. She told kids to sit tight with their seatbelts on and to stay in the car. Now, as she pulled off, the truck followed them. As the mum pretended to get out of the car, the driver of the truck got out too. Luckily, Emma's mum was only pretending to get out, and she then slammed her car door shut and absolutely floored it. She drove away at full speed. The truck driver was startled and watched the family the whole time. Now, Emma's mum sped down a road and turned very quickly at the next junction, hiding her car and her family down a very small road. From the car, they watched as minutes later the green and white truck came speeding down the road, seemingly after them. He didn't notice that their car was hidden down the side road. Emma's sister said that she needed to pee, and their mum agreed that she did too, although Emma recalls her saying, "I'd rather piss my pants in this car than be murdered on the side of this road." At a mum. Coming in at number 7, we have the Time Travelers. In 1988, 2 businessmen were driving along Highway 167 near Lafayette in Louisiana. As they were driving, they came across a vintage car going really slowly, like really slowly. In the United States, old cars are restricted to as and when they're actually allowed to drive on the road. So the guy driving, who was on his lunch break and later gave his name to a magazine as LC, thought that maybe it was part of a weird midweek ceremonial parade. When he drove by the car, he noticed that the woman driving was wearing 1940s style clothing and was looking very stressed and confused. Elsie stopped to see if she needed help and she nodded, looking like she was about to cry. As he drove up a little way down the road to park his car safely, he turned back around only to see that her car was miraculously gone. Elsie and his business partner kept on driving and they saw another really old car with a newer car parked up in front. That car also then seemed to vanish and Elsie decided to talk to the driver of the newer car, who seemed to have had a very similar experience. The trio of men were absolutely baffled and a little bit afraid. I think genuinely they thought they came across time travelers. Coming into number 6, we have Port Perry. The small Canadian town of Port Perry is located near Route 12. Now this runs up to Cottage Country and the Kawartha Lakes in Ontario. This also lays routes near down to Toronto in one direction and Ottawa in another. Basically, a lot of road trippers pass by or through this town. It seems that in the 1960s, a young man was testing the limits of a motorbike on an old road leading to Scugog Island. Sadly, he pushed too hard and lost control of his bike. The story goes that he came off his bike and hit his head on a rock. Others say that he was decapitated on a barbed wire fence. Either way, there is a rock in the area that has Ghost Rock graffitied on it. The legend goes that those who drive down the road after dark are likely to see a phantom motorbike, or perhaps even a headless motorcyclist. Some report seeing phantom headlights coming at them too. These days people often take a road trip to specifically see the Ghost Rock and try and catch a glimpse of the spectre. This is one road you do not want to take a trip on. We have Death Road in Bolivia at number 5. The north youngest road in Bolivia has been nicknamed the Death Road. In 1995, the road was voted the world's most dangerous road, and in the past 20 plus years it has certainly lived up to that accolade. Do you guys want to have a little look at it? Here it is, here are a few pictures. Whilst it does look very, very breathtaking, at the same time I would not want to drive on it. There are varying reports on the danger of this road, with some suggesting that the yearly death toll is around 300 people. Others suggest that the road sees around 1,300 fatalities in a year. On July the 24th, 1983, around 100 people in a bus were killed as it plummeted down a canyon. The road is a literal death trap. It's narrow, it's on a sheer cliff face, it's potholed, it has hairpin bends, it's dusty, and it's very susceptible to poor weather conditions such as fog, tropical downpours, and landslides. On top of that, the nearest ambulance crew are 2 hours away. Coming into number 4, we have the ghost of the tsunami. Japanese cab drivers in Inishimaki have been complaining of hauntings in their cars since 2011. It seems that following the devastating tsunami of that year, a lot of drivers, especially cabbies, have reported seeing people by the side of the road looking for a ride. Now cab drivers who have stopped to take in these passengers then find that they disappear a short way into their journey. It seems the phenomenon was caught on camera in 2012 as CCTV at a taxi rank in Japan showed a woman approaching and passing through a car. It seems that the tsunami was so sudden that many people on foot were swept away and killed. 6,000 people were killed in the Inishimaki area alone. Coming into number 3, we have fresh blood. In a Reddit thread, drivers answered a post that asked what the weirdest, scariest thing was that had happened while they were driving. Redditor Eolond wrote that they were driving with their friend in the middle of nowhere. They said they were driving at around 1 in the morning, and as they drove, they discovered a huge swath of blood. They said a few seconds later, there was another patch totally covered in blood. They wrote that at the time they figured that someone must have hit a deer, although they were weirded out that actually there didn't seem to be any car damage or any sign of a carcass. In their teenage imaginations, shortly after, they freaked out that someone was bleeding in the woods or there was a killer on the loose. Honestly, if I was driving and I saw a whole load of fresh blood, I would be super freaked out. Coming into number 2, we have New Jersey's Route 23. Is it me, or is New Jersey the weirdest and most haunted state in the whole of America? On Honestly, there's so much creepy stuff going on in New Jersey. So maybe the locals are used to all of the spooks, but if you're not local, you do not want to drive along Route 23, ever, let alone at night. The stretch in question is Clinton Road, a 10-mile run between Newfoundland, New Jersey and Upper Greenwood Lake. Along this piece of road, drivers have spotted anything from ghosts, ghouls, witches, demons, Satanists, and members of the Ku Klux Klan. Most popular are the legends of ghost vehicles, a Camaro from a fatal crash, and a phantom truck. It was also along this road that a body of a man was found in 1983 by a passing cyclist. An autopsy of the man showed that he had died of foul play and that there were ice crystals in the blood vessels near his heart. The death led to the arrest of a member of the Mafia, Richard Kalinsky, in 1986. The killer was local and was said to have chosen the stretch of road to dump bodies. Now, the road also seemingly runs through the middle of nowhere and is home to America's longest traffic light wait, which means you could be stuck on this road stationary for a full 5 minutes. Now, I wouldn't want to be exposed to all manner of spooks just waiting in my car. No. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the Q8 Creep. A video was uploaded to YouTube in January 2015 from a car's dashcam in Kuwait. I can't speak Arabic, so I'm not too sure what's being said in the video, but basically the driver sounds truly and utterly terrified. The driver starts the footage as he sees a white figure in the road. Check it out.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
The driver starts getting really terrified with the figure, and it kinda looks like a hunchback old woman with long black hair. Now she starts running towards him as he's trying to reverse away. Have another look. Honestly, if this is fake, then the guy behind the wheel is a great actor. To me, this looks like a road witch. That's my only explanation. Is a road witch a thing? I think so, because there she is. So at number 10, we have tarantulas. This story comes from a trucker, and honestly, I am truly terrified. The trucker's daughter took to Reddit to explain that her mum had an experience during her life on the road. She said that one day she was driving through Arizona and she saw a whole load of leaves blowing across the road in the distance. She said that she was actually pretty confused as to why the road was covered in leaves, considering that it was surrounded by pine trees. Pine trees, famously piney, not leafy. When she got closer, however, she realised that the leaves were actually tarantulas. Oh my god. And yeah, not just one tarantula, not two, but thousands of migrating tarantulas. No fun. She was unable to stop her truck suddenly, so unfortunately she had to drive over them. She did stop at the first available opportunity and found guts and legs caking the inside wheel well of the truck. Grim and terrifying. And grim again.
Number 9, The Street with No Name, and it's not the U2 song. Located in New South Wales, Australia, locals do everything they can to avoid this stretch of road. So much so that it is on the list of top 10 haunted roads in the world. The street itself is an overgrown alleyway that runs along a viaduct, and no one can quite put their finger on why it seems like it's surrounded by evil. The area itself has been plagued by horrific bloody crimes, and many visitors have reported feeling like they can't breathe, smelling strange odors, and hearing someone following them, and then no one's there. According to legend, around 6 young people have been found discarded on the road, and each case went cold. 3 disappearances have been confirmed as true, as more than lore and actual fact, but the curiosity that surrounds Jubilee Park and the street with no name remain unknown. Number 8, Sweet Hollow Road. Not to be confused with Sleepy Hollow, though Sweet Hollow probably deserves the name more. It is listed on top haunted roads in the world. Located on the north shore of Long Island in northwestern Suffolk County, the road along with the surrounding woods are said to be notoriously haunted. Local lore suggests that indigenous tribes considered the area cursed and wisely wouldn't set foot on it, but then settlers were like, whatever, of course they were. From several sightings of a mysterious lady near the overpass, invisible hands pushing cars towards safety, and a policeman with a hole in the back of his head have all been experienced in Sweet Hollow. Additionally, the woods are plagued by the spirits of those who perished in a fire that destroyed a nearby asylum. So basically, if you're in New York and you want something spooky to go with your bagel, then I suggest taking a trip down Sweet Hollow Road. Number 7, Killeen, Texas. This Reddit user was driving through Killeen, Texas around 2 AM, and we all know how creepy sometimes driving at night can seem. He was heading back to the hotel him and his wife were staying at, and he's about to merge onto the road when he sees lights flashing far behind him as if he was about to run into them. But there was more than enough distance, so he was like, what? Why are you yelling? Calm down. Whatever, he brushed brushed it off as road rager, but then the car started tailing way too closely. In the rearview mirror, he could make out two people, and one of them pulls from the back seat something long and thin. Get what I'm saying? He then decided to make sure the car was following him, so he wasn't crazy, signaled left, signaled right, and sure enough, the car did the same. Eventually, the Reddit user guns off the highway and pulls into a nearby parking lot and cuts the lights. He watches the car, and like some miracle, it passes right in front of them, and they don't even see, but he sees like the people looking side to side looking for them. His wife starts to get concerned, as you would, but after a few minutes, they leave and make it safely to the hotel. Still, whoever they were got a good look at their license plate, so needless to say, he was driving with one eye over his shoulder for the rest of their stay. Number 6, the Dead Man's Curve. The Dead Man's Curve already has a title that should be on this list. It lies at the junction of routes 222 and 125 east of Cincinnati. As you can tell from its name, it's definitely haunted. In October 1969, 5 teens were killed by a speeding car, and since then, people have reported seeing a faceless hitchhiker. One witness reported seeing a pitch black silhouette of a man. She said, and I quote, "I noticed a man's shape on the side of the road. It turned like it was hitchhiking with an arm sticking up. The thing wore light colored pants, a blue shirt, long hair, and a blank, flat surface where the face should have been. We looked back, there was nobody there. I've also seen the black shadow figure walking its slow, labored, dragging walk by the side of the road." Unquote. Could it have been the body of one of the teens or another soul who was lost, perhaps the one who caused the death of these teens, doomed to wander the road for eternity? Number 5, Crossfire. Reddit user many_pancakes recounts this story his girlfriend experienced while taking a trip to Florida. Quote, "My partner went to Florida with her family when she was younger, and they were driving around trying to find some food until they found a Chinese restaurant, and they went in and had some food. There were no other customers, lots of staff, everyone seemed very tense, but the food was great. They left and had a lovely rest of their day. During breakfast the next morning, they turned on the telly, and the news showed the place they had eaten, and they were like, 'Oh wow, we went there.' Then the story started, and it turns out no more than 10 minutes after they left, there was a massive shoot up and they all killed one another. Turns out the ignorant British tourists just sat in between some kind of Asian turf war." Unquote. I mean, at least the food was good? I don't know. That's super creepy. Number 4, the Beast of Bray Road. Mark Shackelman was driving on Highway 18 east of Jefferson County, and it would soon turn into a night he would never forget. As he was passing the indigenous burial mounds in the area, he saw something very tall, or someone, standing near the mound. He got out of his car to start approaching it and soon noticed a repulsive smell of rotting meat. As he got closer, he realized that it definitely wasn't a man, as it looked around 7 feet tall and must have weighed around 500 pounds with the amount of muscle. Mark had heard rumors of the Beast of Bray Road but never saw it before. He booked it away from the site, only to gather courage to revisit some days later. The beast was there again, but this time he stared back, making like these weird grunting sounds. His face was that of a wolf, but his hands were human, though it looked like he had a twisted thumb. After several minutes, the beast disappeared into the forest. Several sightings of the beast are charted across decades, but no one knows if this beast is a man or animal or something else entirely. Number 3, Mothman on the Road. The jury is out as to whether Mothman is actually evil or just simply an omen for humanity. This story from the Thought Catalog is another example of the mystery that is the Mothman. Our storyteller was driving a Freightliner down the 322 west towards Chesterland, Ohio, when he saw a massive flying bird heading straight for him. Thinking he was about to hit his windshield, he ducked out of instinct, only to hear a loud bang as it hit the metal box that his car was driving. He got out and saw it lying on the side of the road, but no sooner after they began approaching it did the creature just stand up on human legs and blast off into the sky. Obviously they ran back into their truck, only to stop to refuel at a gas station like miles later once they thought, they'd gotten rid of it. It was then that they noticed imprints on their truck that looked like wings 6 feet across. The driver avoids driving down that road whatever the cost. Let us know your Mothman theories down below. Evil or not, Mothman does sound like someone I'd never like to meet. Number 2, Wolf Creek. If you've seen the movie, then you know the basic tale, though it's not exactly what happened. The film is about 3 tourists who travel to Wolf Creek only to have their car break down, and a friendly mechanic offers to help them, even gives them a space to sleep. But when they wake up the next morning, horror strikes. This story is actually a combination of what happened to Peter Falconio and Joanna Lees, who were actually traveling on Stewart Highway, and another Australian killer named Ivan Millet. About halfway between their destination and at night, a man got their attention on the road and made them pull over. He said that there were sparks coming out of the exhaust, and when Peter went to the back of the car to see the problem, Joanne heard a shot. The man named Bradley Murdoch tied her hands and then left to deal with Peter's body. Joanne took the opportunity to run and hide behind the bushes, and when he came back to look for her, he couldn't find her. When he left, she waited to ensure he wasn't coming back. She hailed 2 drivers passing on the road and asked for help. He was actually caught and sentenced to 28 years in prison, and Joanne has only recently come out with a book recounting her encounter with evil. Number 1, last but not least, this was so creepy. Since starting this job, I think I've learned a thing or two about cruel killers, more than I ever wanted to know, to be honest. But still, it could never happen to me, right? Well, the uncle of this Reddit user, That's a Paddlin', thought the same thing until years later, after a road trip that went wrong, he made a grim discovery. His uncle used to study medicine at the University of Chicago and decided to go on an adventure one day after class. He decided to hitchhike on his way home, and the man who picked him up seemed kind, upbeat, and super friendly, not creepy at all. But sure enough, the man eventually took a wrong turn. When he pointed this out to the driver, the man simply put his hand on his knee and said, "No son, you're coming with me," unquote, and smiled menacingly. His uncle froze, and as soon as they hit traffic, unlocked the door and got the heck out of Dodge. Needless to say, he second-guessed hitchhiking from this point on, but didn't realize how deadly his mistake could have been until years later. While having coffee at a cafe, he caught the image of the very same man on the screen who had been arrested for the assault and killing of 20 young men. The man's name? John Wayne Gacy. The police noted that Gacy had removed the door handle off the passenger side door to prevent men he picked up from escaping. Just like he did.
In at number 10, we have this story of the delivery man. Of course, this creepy story happened around Death Valley, a hot and sparse desert in East California. This story comes from a Reddit user who shares an experience their parents had around 20 years ago. They said that their parents were planning on a weekend trip to a hotel around 30 minutes outside of Death Valley town, right in the middle of the desert. When they got to the place they were staying in, it looked totally abandoned. The dad got out of the car to look around and the mum stayed inside. Out of nowhere, a guy holding a bunch of newspapers turned up and started approaching the mum, whose window in the car was open. He said that his motorbike had broken down and that he delivered papers to Death Valley town. If he didn't get them there, he would lose his job. The mum couldn't see the motorbike and had a very bad feeling about the guy. Now, the guy begged her to let him in the car and she refused. Eventually, the dad came back around the corner and the paper delivery guy looked panicked. He dropped his papers and ran off into the desert. When the mum and dad went to check into the hotel, the receptionist told them that actually they don't get newspapers delivered to the hotel at all. When they checked the newspapers, they dated back to 1954. Now I'm wondering, was he a murderer or a local ghost?
Coming in at number 9 is The Hitchhiker, and I'm pretty sure everyone has heard some type of variation of this one, so let's just get into it. This legend centers around some mysterious hitchhikers which we already know we shouldn't be picking up or giving a ride. A cab driver found someone dressed in all black with a hood over their face looking for a ride. He picked them up and the person gave an address the driver wasn't familiar with but assured him he could give him directions. They get further and further out, taking back roads and alleys, and eventually they're out of the city completely. Rattled, the driver asks if they're going the right way, to which the person says, "Don't worry, we're almost there." They end up on a road that's basically falling apart, and at this point the driver finally turns around to ask where exactly they're going, to find the back seat empty, and by the time he turns back around, he realizes he's heading straight for the edge of a cliff and plummets to his death. Now, I'm not sure whether this legend is supernatural in any way, like is a hitchhiker a real person? Are they a ghost? How did they vanish from the car like that? I'm confused. Either way, just be very wary when you're picking up hitchhikers. Actually, just don't do it. Don't do it. At number 8 we have the waiting car, and apparently this has happened to many people on road trips. But let's look at one family's experience in particular. Every summer this family would go on a road trip from North Texas to Mexico, and when you're on a stretch of highway in the middle of the desert, it's not really a big deal if the same car has been behind you for ages. I mean, there's not really anywhere else it can go. So at this point the family had been in Mexico for an hour but had a few more hours of the drive left. The user's mum suddenly goes to her dad, "Miguel, that car behind us, it's been behind us since we left Laredo." And the dad responded with what I said earlier about it not being that big of a deal. But then eventually the car behind them started getting closer, and at one point it was practically touching their rear. The other car was playing with them. It would ease off them, then blind them with their headlights, then tailgate them again, etc. And thankfully the mum saw a police police car up ahead and they pulled over. After telling the cop what happened, the policeman told them how people had their cars stolen on empty highways by criminals and thugs. He drove behind them for a while for safekeeping, and around 10 minutes later, they saw the same car from before on the side of the road waiting for them. Filling at number 7 slot are Hell's Angels. So originally people thought this myth or legend originated sometime in the 90s in LA, but apparently it started in the early 80s in Montana with the Hell's Angels biker gang as the centerpiece. It goes like this: if you're ever driving home late and you pass a car that has its high beams on, as a courtesy gesture you would usually flash your high beams at them to let them know so they stop blinding every driver passing them. But in this instant, a car with high beams on isn't just accidental. If you flashed your high beams at these cars, that was basically you signing your own death warrant. Cars like that were usually driven by initiates for local gangs, mainly Hell's Angels, and their initiation, I guess, was for them to kill you. So next time you decide to go on a road trip, be very careful on who you signal to. Now at number 6 is the petrol pump trap. I think the thing that gives me the most anxiety while driving is running out of petrol and there being no petrol pumps within like a 10-kilometer radius of me, and I'm just like, wow, I'm gonna be stuck here forever, what do I do? But anyway, sometimes finding a petrol pump just isn't that lucky at all. There are so many legends surrounding petrol pumps and bad things happening to people at them, you'd be surprised. Apparently, gas stations are a popular place for people to get ambushed. This story in particular is about two girls who were on a road trip and decided to stop for gas at 10 p.m. They found a petrol pump that was for the most part not shady at all. It was brightly lit, looked clean, looked busy with other cars, it seemed perfectly fine. The only open pump was in the middle of the station, so the girl got out to fill the tank. As she unscrewed the gas cap, she heard a shout and then turned around to see a man with a gun and a group of people with him. She soon realized all the cars around her were empty and they were decoys, and it was actually a trap for whoever drove into it. The man started yelling at her to get onto the ground and for her friend to get out of the car, otherwise he'd shoot them or rape them or worse. Her friend sat frozen in the car, so the other girl offered to go in and talk to her and get her out. But then obviously instead of talking to her friend, she puts the car in reverse and they both managed to escape. That was just one of many stories about things like this happening, so it's definitely not even a legend but a real thing. Coming in at number 5 is Port Perry Ghost Road. Now legend has it that on this road a motorcyclist crashed at night and was killed sometime in the 1950s. Ever since then, drivers on the road seem to see a motorcycle light in their rearview mirror. The light then catches up to the car and passes it before disappearing entirely. Other accounts say they've just seen a red light roaming the road at night, but you somehow are never able to trace its source. Shady. Just pure shady. And many TV documentaries have been made about the legend and it's become quite a tourist attraction. However, with every legend there are skeptics. Locals who have lived in and around the area for generations say there was no motorcycle accident around the time of the legend. Having said that, the Ontario Ghosts and Hauntings Research Society, which I didn't even know existed, maintain that there are ghost lights in the area and a dead body was found in the area in the 60s or 70s, so even if a motorcyclist didn't die, this road really should be avoided at all costs. At number 4 is the cult trap. Again, variations of this legend always float around, so it's hard to pinpoint really which story was the original. But anyway, legend has it that a man was driving through a bunch of rural back roads at night because he thought it would be a shortcut compared to his usual route. At one point, the roads led him to a long road that was surrounded by crops or tall grass. Halfway down the road, they see a car, and in some stories it's on one side of the road, in others it's parked over 2 lanes, but in all variations the boot and doors are always open. Clothes are strewn all over the road and there are 2 bodies on the ground. Obviously the driver's first reaction is to get out and help the people, but when they go to call the ambulance, they realize they have no service. And then things get a bit fishy. Everything just seems too accident-like, almost like it had been staged. Now the next part has many variations. Sometimes the driver just completely avoids the scene and goes around it. Another has him seeing reflections of light on eyes in the grass by the road. But either way, as the person drives away, they see the 2 bodies on the ground getting on their knees and 20 people magically emerging from the tall grass. Had the person stayed, well, we can all guess what would have become of him or her. Filling our number 3 slot is the pavement Bigfoot. I just tried to be creative there, but there's a legend that surrounds Bray Road in the town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Even the name of the town sounds Lord of the Rings-esque. But anyway, to any person, Bray Road looks pretty, peaceful, and normal, surrounded by crops and greenery. It looks as good as any road, really. False. By night, the beast of of Bray is said to haunt a certain part of Bray Road. Eyewitness reports have varied throughout time, but the beast is meant to have Bigfoot-like proportions, and many have speculated that it's actually in fact a werewolf. But honestly, if you're giving me a choice between running into Bigfoot on my road trip or running into a werewolf, I would honestly choose none and just cancel my trip. Is that not the obvious choice here? I'm not about to get stuck in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin with the beast of Bray Road ready to attack me in the sidelines. That's just a hard no from me, and it should be a hard no from you too. Now at number 2 is Route 2A. Now Route 2A is a dangerous route located in Haynesville, Maine. Now this one is known for the high number of accidents that happen there, the bad driving conditions, and the whole host of spirits that have been seen there over the past few years, or decades really. Great, everything that makes a road not drivable. You know a road is problematic when there's even a song about it called A Tombstone Every Mile. Need I say more? Whilst many people have died in car accidents there's also an urban legend surrounding the road. Many people have seen a woman shouting at drivers passing by and saying how her husband is trapped in their car and that they need help. But if you do end up stopping for her, she just disappears. The story goes that the husband got stuck in there and died of carbon monoxide poisoning, and the wife either froze to death outside waiting for help or she was hit by a car, and hence they have some unfinished business with the area. Other accounts have said they've seen a little girl on the side of the road that was killed by a truck years ago. Either way, let's just not. And finally, at number 1 is Shades of Death Road. Honestly, this one can be done in 5 seconds because all I have to say is look at the name of the road, have one brain cell, don't travel on it. The end. But no, seriously, Shades of Death Road, real name by the way, is a quiet country lane located in Warren County, New Jersey, and the legends surrounding this road are plentiful. The road runs alongside an old haunted lake bed which has pillars of mist rising from it, and no one knows how that's caused, but it's just there. Apparently, early settlers killed native Indians and threw them into the lake, and their unhappy souls lived on to haunt the lake and the road. Some say they've seen the dead walk alongside the road amidst the mist. People in the area say the site used to be the location of so many deaths they thought it was cursed. Another story was that the original people who lived in the area were a band of squatters, vile men who used to fight each other for women, and those fights would result in someone always dying. As their reputation grew, the area started being called Shades of Death. Another story was that it was actually called the Shades originally because of the low-hanging trees that formed a canopy, which made it easier for murders to happen there and stay unsolved. Either way, whichever story you believe, this road is one you should definitely try to avoid for a plethora of reasons, and I just told you all of them.
10, we have the Huntsman. One Redditor described the scary moment they realized they weren't alone on their road trip, the moment they realized a killer was in the car and ready to strike. Responding to an Ask Reddit about the creepiest thing seen while driving, they wrote, "This is Australia. I drove about 3 hours at night from my father's rural property back into town, dark all the way. I made no stops and it was an uneventful trip, until I began to reach civilization at last, and in the faint illumination of motorway lights, I saw a large crumpled shape on the dashboard directly in front of me. It quickly resolved itself to be a huntsman spider sitting on the dash with front legs raised and looking straight at me. I hadn't opened the door in 3 hours. The thing had been in there with me for 3 hours. I was able to pull over soon at a service station and pump the car full of insecticide. I never found the body." Okay, this may not be a killer in the human sense or even a scary ghost, but a deadly spider riding along with me in assuming like a biting kind of position, scary fighting position is pretty up there with one of the most terrifying things that could ever happen on the road.
In our 9th spot, we have the road that doesn't exist. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then why don't you give it a big thumbs up because it really helps us out. This story was shared by Reddit user Team Macon7. Several years ago, she and her friends decided to go on a road trip to visit their mutual friend at her university. They printed off detailed directions, and the trip was only supposed to take 3 hours. But at one point, the directions took them through a sketchy path in the woods, and they were driving through this forest area for about an hour. By then, it was already past 3 hours, and they should have arrived there already. But finally, 4.5 hours later, they arrived at their friend's place. They enjoyed the weekend there, and a couple months later, they decided to go back and visit. So they got their directions and followed the exact same route that they did before, except they never encountered this long path through the woods. It's like all of a sudden the road just disappeared. I mean, it could just be that they took a wrong turn, but they are insistent that both times they followed the directions accurately. Somehow, a road just disappeared. Coming in at number 8, we have the gas station. So this next woman shared a story from the time her and her girlfriends went on a road trip together. It was around 10 at night and they needed to stop for gas. Since they were young females, they looked for a well-lit and busy gas station to pull over to. Once they found one, they pulled over and the driver got out to fill the tank. But just as she started unscrewing the gas cap, an armed man with a gun and his crew surrounded her and shouted at her to get on the ground. That's when she realized it had been a trap. All the other cars at the gas station were empty. No one was driving them. They just positioned their cars there and waited until someone used the center pump. Thankfully, this girl was a quick thinker and the gunman wasn't that smart. She begged for her to go into the car and talk to her friends, and he let her. But as soon as she got in her car, she threw it in reverse and nearly ran the guys over. She then sped out of there so fast and never looked back. Coming in at number 7, we have the road psycho. So this next woman and her husband were driving on the highway late at night on their way home from a trip. There wasn't a lot of cars on the highway, so it was a pretty peaceful drive. That was until this old lady raced up beside them in the adjacent lane. She then started to merge into their lane and tried to ram them off the road. And it's not like she was some innocent old lady that just didn't see them. No, the whole time this was happening, she was staring right at them and smiling, like she purposely wanted to see them get into a car accident. That is one sick old lady. In our 6th spot, we have the close call. So this young woman took a road trip to Florida with her family. That's when they decided to pull over to get some dinner. They finished their meals and headed to their hotel. The next day during breakfast, they turned on the television and saw that a reporter was talking about the restaurant that they had just eaten at the previous night. Turns out that 10 minutes after they left, there was a huge gang fight that took place in the restaurant and a number of people were shot dead. Talk about a close call. Had they just been there for 10 minutes longer, they may not have been alive today. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the trailer. Honestly, while researching this topic, I found a number of stories of people getting followed by creepy men in trucks. So please, be careful out there. And be extra cautious if you're driving alone at night. So the story is basically about that. It was around 2 a.m. and a man was headed to his hotel with his wife. That's when he noticed that the truck behind him had been following him for quite some time. Growing paranoid, he put on his turning signals as if he was about to get off at the exit, and so did the truck. But he didn't get off at the exit. The truck continued to follow close behind and copied his every move. That's when he decided to get off at the next exit and find a full parking lot to pull into. He pulled into it, parked beside another car, and switched off his lights. And what do you know? The truck came into the parking lot and made circles looking for them. After a couple of minutes, the truck finally leaves, and the man makes it safely to his destination. That's horrifying though. I don't even want to know what the driver's intentions were. In our 4th spot, we have the guardian angel. So according to this next Reddit user, her grandpa used to be a long-distance truck driver. So he would often drive long hours on unfamiliar roads. Well, one day he was driving down a single-lane country road. It was around 2 to 3 in the morning and the road was pitch black. Only his headlights were lighting up the road. Well, as he was driving, he felt a hand on his shoulder and a voice whisper his name in his ear. As soon as he heard this, he slammed on his brakes. And good thing he did. Seconds later, his headlights lit up a pile of 3 crashed cars that were blocking the entire road. He had just managed to escape the wreckage. Had he not braked when he did, he would have smacked right into the cars. Now, the reason he stopped was because he recognized the voice. It was the voice of his mom that passed away a few years previously. So she was looking out for him and saved him from getting into a terrible crash. Moving on at number 3, we have the end of the road. This story was shared by Reddit user Che Sarah Sarah. So this happened while she was driving from California to Ohio with her mom. They were driving at night on a lone road when all of a sudden her check engine light came on. So she stopped the car and got out. But when she did, she noticed the rest of the road was blocked off. The road just ended out of nowhere. It was under construction, and so the whole road was blocked off completely. Good thing that they stopped when they did, or else they would have crashed right into the construction zone. Not only that, they were in the middle of nowhere. There were no other cars or buildings or signs. So they just hopped back in the car and prayed that they would somehow find their way. Coming in at number 2, we have the flat tire. If you drive, Here's your reminder to always carry a spare tire with you and make sure you know how to change a tire by yourself. So this next individual was driving from eastern Colorado to Wyoming. It was the middle of the night and they were alone on a dirt road. That's when they heard a loud bang. So it was their tire. It had popped. So he pulls over and gets out into the darkness. He begins changing his tire as fast as he can when he hears a man say, "Need any help with that?" Yeah, that's my impression of the man. He said it just like that, probably. He spun around, but no one was standing there. He then grabbed his tire iron and started yelling out, "Who's out there?" But all there was dead silence. He finished putting on the tire and sped the heck out of there. I'm just glad that he didn't start walking around in the forest, trying to investigate. Because you all know that if this was a horror movie, that's what he would have done. And it would not have ended well for him. And in our number 1 spot, we have the ghost truck. So this next individual and her boyfriend were driving back home from a wedding. The trek home was about a 3-hour drive. The boyfriend had stayed sober as he was the designated driver. As they were driving along some dark country roads, they came across a truck headed directly at them. They both screamed as the bright headlights washed over them. He swerved the car to the side and nearly into a ditch. But when they looked behind them, there was nothing. No truck, no lights, no nothing. They were on a narrow country road. There was no way the truck could have went by them without smacking them. So what is it that they saw? They are convinced that it was a ghost truck. And turns out that years ago, a man lost his life after crashing head-on with a trucker who had gotten lost and went down the wrong way. So that's pretty scary. All right, guys.